Thank you. So I'm going to talk about what a job developer is, and I basically I've stolen this information, some of the information I've got from online. So I don't know how many are new to the field, how many work as employment consultants or job developers, and maybe a combination there. Our role has changed here at Lambton College. Originally it was divided. Employment consultants did one thing and job developers did another, but they combined the role in the last 2 years. So initiates and maintains ongoing personal contacts with a variety of business and industry representatives and job placement / training agencies to promote programs for participant placement, makes cold calls, explains the benefits and employment support services provided by programs to employers, and our programs have become quite a few. We've got the ES, which is our mainstay. We've also got YJC Summer, and YJL Plus. We've got, for those of you that are working on COJG, which is a good entry point for some job developers when meeting with employers. Research, internet, newspapers, agencies, and other resources for job leads, collects data from employers related to job orders, including job requirements and skills. So that's just part of it. Matches job skills with applicant qualifications, keeps updated regarding job fairs and internet resources, and you can continue to read that if you like for the next minute or so. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. So, what is a job developer? Aside from what I just read there, a job developer is primarily a business marketing and salesperson. And one thing I have to indicate and stress, because I've done both roles, I did work for a number of years for a social service agency. A job developer today, in order to be truly successful, has to have the mind that they are a business marketing and salesperson. They're not a social worker. Part of your work, maybe as an employment consultant, will be that, but when you're truly doing the job development side of things, you are in a business situation, a business environment. And one way to get into that business marketing environment is to actually talk the talk, replace the words such as client with candidate. And when we're talking about this when we talk with employers, and the word employer with account. You're an account manager in some respects, their accounts. That's the lingo that they use. They understand that. The word client has a different connotation for them. You can use the word job seeker potentially as well for those people who are looking for work. So just keep that in mind when you're working with an employer. Use the language that they're using, and in other words, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Who's more important in the job development process? I'd like to think about that for a few seconds. Is it the client or the employer? So I've had this discussion with a number of people, and initially when I started in this field, the client was very, very important to me. What happened with the client was important, but there are a number of reasons why that isn't so. And while the client is important, the most important in the job development process is in fact the employer. And why is that? Why are they the most important? Anybody think of the reasons why that would be? Well, one of the reasons is without the employer, there wouldn't be jobs for your clients. There wouldn't be employment available to them. One of the things that you want to look at is how the relationship is. With an employer, the relationship is ongoing. In order for it to be ongoing, it has to be a positive relationship. You're going to have clients that, or job seekers, or candidates that they're going to come and go. They may be around for one shot, find employment, and then they're gone. They may leave the area. But you're always going to have a relationship with that employer if you're successful. As I indicated, clients will come and go. I work on the premise that the importance of the client becomes number one only when there are issues with the employer and the employer is at fault. In other words, you've got a situation maybe where it could be abuse, it could be issues around hours and things like that. That's that's a case where I go to bat for the client or the candidate, the person that we've placed with that particular employer. Otherwise, you want the employer to be number one, and employers will see through this. I did a little bit of a graphic here. I had some help with this this week. So the larger circle obviously is the employer or account. You're behind the scenes there working with the employer and trying to find a fit, and you find a candidate that's going to work. So the candidate is at the fringe. Now I could have added a number of other circles there to show you that you're working on an ongoing basis with that individual, but always keep in mind who your customer is at a certain level. I'm going to move on now to traits that job developers need to have. One of the traits, and they're not necessarily in any particular order here, is persistence. Remain in contact with an employer until you make the sale or unless notified otherwise. You may be told, there's nothing here, but be persistent about it. If someone cancels out on you, attempt to reschedule another meeting. Some of this is fairly common sense. You've probably done it in other situations. Knowledgeable is the next one. Know as much as possible about the industry of the employer and what type of job seekers the employer hires. Have a good understanding of that. Confident. Be sure of your service and your product, and that we'll call a product the job seeker or candidate when marketing. If you're not confident, how can you expect to break through and develop an understanding about your product? If you're not confident about placing your product, the job seeker, the employer is going to read that. Flexible. My job doesn't involve too many after-hours situations, but one of the realities is sometimes you'll have to book an early morning appointment or a late in the afternoon appointment. Be flexible enough and willing enough to do that, because keep in mind that you're only a small part of their business, although you're important to their business in that you're going to find the right fit for them. They're making time for you, so typically it's on their schedule, so be flexible enough to be aware of that. I generally don't meet on Saturdays. I do meet sometimes after hours, sometimes early in the morning, just for a convenience for the employer. And typically I meet at their site. I don't ask employers to come in and drop in on us, because I want to know what they're about. I want to know their business as well. In order to be successful, really truly successful as a job developer, individuals need to be good communicators. Sometimes your conversations will take place over the phone. You need to be clear and concise, be knowledgeable, and most of all, be truthful with an employer. Over the phone is one of those situations, if you're doing a cold call or a warm call, you have to present well enough that the employer gets a sense of your confidence and your comfortableness in communicating to him. The other areas is service-oriented. To be service-oriented isn't simply returning a call or finding a candidate. It's finding the right candidate, the fit for a particular position. And it's working with that employer on ensuring you're going to have the most successful placement you can possibly have with that individual. I think I just jumped over one there. My apologies. I talked about good communicator. Organized. Know what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. Develop a marketing plan around that. Now, typically, depending on the employer, I'll develop some specific marketing based on what I know of the employer. Maybe it's from previous contact, maybe it's just I've read something about the employer, so I develop a marketing plan around that. So not every employer is you're going to develop a process that's going to be the same in relation to approaching them. Accountable. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Remember, under promise and over deliver. And this is pretty key. I make no guarantees when I'm working with employers and servicing them. I don't tell them I'm going to find a candidate necessarily. I say I may potentially have a good candidate for you immediately, or I'm going to continue looking till I do find one, and we work from that premise so that they're not or don't have high expectations. the other areas is learn the basics. Your organization, its focus, targeted industries, and that's based on maybe some past history as to who your organization focuses on, who they've been most successful with. Take time to learn about the industries and the jobs and the job seekers that historically your agency has worked with in the past. You can do that by talking to other job developers within the agency as well, and learn how your services relate to those particular accounts. Next, your accounts or employers. Learn about their industry. Learn as much as possible regarding your employers, the positions they hire for instance, what the wages are, how they hire. Check websites. Talk to the employer about their business. Talk to people who know the employer. Maybe it's a referral that you can talk to in regard to that, and get that information. The more information you go in with when marketing beforehand about that employer, the more you're kind of in tune with what their needs are. You're still going to ask questions about their needs, about their processes and things like that, but it certainly helps to have a bit of awareness, or actually more than a bit of awareness, about the goings on within their organization. Your candidates, again, it's pretty obvious. If you're an employment consultant, you want to know their skills, their interests, their abilities, job requirements, and barriers that prevent employment. And you learn as much as possible about the candidates you work for, how they fit in within available and upcoming positions, what training may be required, what issues they're dealing with, and that includes, retention issues, which is in our business is or can be a major issue. Learning or physical barriers, childcare, transportation. Transportation for us is an issue. We're in a rural area, so getting someone from point A to point B that maybe is half an hour away can almost be impossible or seem impossible at times. So we try to move as many of the barriers as possible when we're dealing with clients, because they're more likely to stay at a job where they're not dealing with, for instance, daycare issues, transportation issues, things like that are going to block them from going to work every day, because things happen. And with our client base, typically they happen on a regular basis. Preparing to market and sell your services. One of the key things is understand your organization. For those who are new to an organization, take a look at their history. Again, talk to job developers, employment consultants. Take a look at who the employers they've worked with in past. And if your agency is like ours, you probably have employer files all over the place. And go through some of those employer files and kind of read over the histories, or you may be using a software package that allows you to input case notes and things like that in as employer files. Understand what your organization wants to accomplish. What is it you're looking at from an organizational standpoint? What do you want to do within the community? And know what your organization expects of you. What are your targets? We're a performance-based organization here, and we have certain targets that we meet on a monthly basis as far as, I would say, we'll talk about closures, but it amounts to placements as well. But typically, if you're an EO office, you have a specific number in a year that you have. We've broken that down into months. What's your role in that? What are the expectations for you as far as targets? And again, historically, who do you target? Types of employers, types of jobs. The sooner you know that, the less likely you're going to be running around and doing work that is non-productive. Know what data you need to collect. What type of information do you need to keep? Successful placements, employment outcomes. That can be very valuable when you're talking to an employer that you haven't worked with before, is that, the amount of success you've had. Maybe you can say that we've been 80% successful in finding employment for our client base, or we've been 80% successful in finding the right fit every time, the first time. How is your organization seen? Find out what employers think of your organization. And it can be eye-opening sometimes, because you may be new to an organization and the organization's been around for 20 to 25 years, and there may be a certain perception that you might have to spend a bit of time changing, correcting, and you want to know how they're viewed in the community. If there is an understanding of what your organization does, and sometimes with our organization, not everyone knows about us, and that includes job seekers and employers. One of the key things is develop and internalize your own sales pitch. You're going to be a lot more comfortable, and from my perspective, if you have a sales pitch, and you can have a phone sales pitch, you can have an in-person sales pitch that covers, you know, for instance, a phone sales pitch is where you want to encourage the employer to move past the phone conversation into a meeting, and so develop that and internalize that sales pitch. And if it involves memorizing it, fine, until you're comfortable in presenting it to an employer over a phone conversation. In-person conversations are a little bit different. I typically go in and do it. I'm not going to go off on a tangent here, or I'm going to try not to do that. But typically, I go in and make conversation and discuss the lighter things initially, and just about something I know about the business or something I know about the individual. And I find that if you can get an individual talking about maybe what they've done or how they started in their business, you're off to a good start in that. Those are just a couple of examples. The other area you want to do is know who you want to work with first. And again, I keep bringing this up, that if you're new to the field or you don't do a lot of job development because of your role, know who you want to work with first. And typically what I would suggest is I hesitantly use this phrase, low-hanging fruit, but go where you're going to be most successful initially, okay? Because it is marketing, it is sales, and there's nothing that kind of encourages you and builds confidence as much as there is a situation where you've made 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 good placements, and it kind of makes you motivated to continue on versus trying to or attempting to go after a particular employer that in all likelihood is going to take you 6 months to develop. And there are those situations. I've done a number of them. I don't spend every day with them, but I have spent, you know, I'll call them once a week or call them once every 2 weeks, and it's taken me 6 months to kind of break through and get a placement with them. So those are kind of the ongoing things. And base it, again, when you're researching employers, base it on your current employment needs of your client. The most available jobs, and typically for us, and they may be with you as well, are the unskilled, semi-skilled, lower wage jobs. And believe me, there are lots of them out there, at least in our area. Identify how you want to make contact in phone, in person, or email, or referral. I discourage, quite honestly, I discourage email until you've built a good relationship with that particular employer. I encourage initially the phone call. If the phone call doesn't work, then I would, you know, kind of prompt the employer by saying, can I follow up with you in person in a couple of weeks, and you know, make the contact that way. Ideally, and again, it sometimes we don't have time to do everything, but ideally the best way to make yourself available and market yourself is to do an in-person contact. People still want that face-to-face as much as we do, you know, we do email, and we do Facebook, and we do Twitter and Snapchat and other things like that. I guess it's my age that really prompts me to say that, because a lot of times the employers you're dealing with are the baby boomers. They're the ones that have been in business for quite a few years. Not always, but sometimes. Schedule a block of time to make specific calls or visits. And people will sometimes say that, oh, if you make 500 calls. I once met a fellow that sold freezer plans, and I don't know if anybody's old enough to know what a freezer plan is, but it's one of those things where you buy the freezer and you get the food in it. So you end up getting fish and beef and chicken and pork and vegetables and stuff like that. So I said to him one day, I said, how many calls do you have to make before you sell one freezer plan? At that time, the freezer plans were like $2,000 to $3,000. Well, he said, I had to make about 500 calls. Can you imagine how discouraging that would be, to make 500 calls to get one sale? But he did it. Where to look for opportunities. Now, some of you are beyond this point. You know already, but I'll go through it anyways. Where to look? Well, look within your organization. I would start with the people you know, and that's other job developers, other employment consultants, other people within the organization, and develop that, your current network. Everybody knows people, and I have we've had 2 job developers that have started recently doing the YJC, and the one in particular knows a lot of people within the city of Sarnia, and she is using her contacts to develop placements for youth. It works out very well. Internet is another good source, particularly for information about companies and what's going on. Yellow Pages, we all know that. Newspaper still being used, not so much as it was, but there's still stories that come up about new businesses that are put in the local, particularly the local newspapers. Chamber of Commerce employer lists, if you belong to or could be a member of the Chamber of Commerce, you should be able to get employer lists from them in order to develop an employer base. Economic development organizations, stay in contact with them. Trade organizations as well, trade associations, pardon me. So those are all opportunities of where to look. Some tips for preparing to make contact. Talk to experienced job developers. And one of the job developing or job developers are a little like real estate agents. Same type of field, pretty much, marketing and sales. And sometimes it's difficult outside your own organization to talk to job developers because they're pretty, I'm looking for a politically correct word here, not a secretive group necessarily, but they keep things pretty close to their chest because it's a competition with other agencies potentially. It doesn't need to be, but sometimes it is. But if you can make a friendship with somebody that's in another organization, by all means do so, because sometimes they've got information that they know about jobs and they know about employers that are looking for people, and sometimes they can't fill those needs. Practice describing your services. Again, have some knowledge about what you are in fact marketing, and really understand what it is you're marketing and to employers. And again, I'll repeat this. This came up the last slide. Plan to contact a large number of employers, but in all honesty, if you've got a list and you want to make 20 calls in a day, that's a pretty high number. But even if you only got through 5 of those calls and they were quality calls, and in that you actually carried out a conversation, you didn't simply call them up and say, "Hi, I'm Dave, and I'd like to tell you about my services," and talk for 30 seconds and that's the end of it. If you get a 5 or 10 minute or 15-minute conversation with employers, and some of them possibly will talk to you that long, and then you move to set up meetings with them. Another key thing is identify whom you need to speak to, and that may be a matter of calling the agency first or the organization first and saying, who's responsible for hiring? Who makes the decision ultimately as to who's hiring and who's going to hire who? And generally they're pretty good at providing you with that information. I've just an aside here. I've typically found large organizations are very difficult to get information from necessarily. They have gatekeepers in place in some cases that take a while to get past, and sometimes you spend a lot of time developing those employers for we have an employer right now that has 800 employees, and we spent about a year trying to develop a relationship with that employer, and finally broke in, and I think we placed probably in the area of 30 to 50 clients with that company. But some of the other larger corporations in our area, we've yet to make contact. We've been pretty busy working with some of the smaller and medium-sized. Research employers. Again, know as much as you possibly can about employers. Schedule a time to do what you need to do as far as making calls. Set aside that time and stick to the time. I don't mean to say that you need to make 20 calls in a day. Make 5 quality calls. And if those calls turn out to be fruitful for you, that's fantastic. Most importantly, in my business, in my experience over 20-some years, and this I've done real estate as well. I've sold real estate. Very important to get a face-to-face employment with face-to-face appointment with employers. That's critical, and it just means so much more when you sit in front of somebody and have a conversation with them. I mentioned this earlier. as much as you can, use only business language, because that's the language they understand. They're not about clients. They're not about social work. They're about business, and that's their approach. There are sometimes errors that we can make in this whole process. Failing to learn what your organization can and cannot offer employers. And sometimes we want the best, we want to go beyond, above and beyond, but if you can't deliver a particular service to an employer, it becomes an untruth, and employers, like everybody else, are very quick to judge. Offering employers people or services they don't need. Distinguish between something in a situation where you can help and where you can't help, and sometimes you're talking down one road and they really want to go another road. So determine really, based on your conversations with employers and your questions, what it is they need, and don't go down that road where you're discussing something that absolutely isn't of interest to them. Calling or visiting with little understanding of the industry, the employer's business, or their employment needs. Never go to a meeting blind with no knowledge of their industry or their organization or their employer needs. Always do a little bit of research, do your homework, and sorry, I've got behind myself here. I've gone to sleep pressing the button. Exaggerating what you can offer or achieve. Never offer something, again, that goes back to number two. Number one, my apologies. Going back to number one there, exaggerating what you can offer or achieve. Don't offer something like, I'll use the example reference checks. I don't do reference checks. Don't offer to do them. There's a little bit of a liability around that in some cases, so I try to avoid doing that. The other thing is that we sometimes forget that employers are not in the business of making jobs. They're not social service agencies. They will not hire without a reason, and they will not assist you in developing a job unless it makes financial sense to them. If you come to them and say, oh, Bob, you know what, I've got a client, they really need to work, they're down on their luck, and you might have a champion that would agree to take somebody on like that, and but just beware of that they're not going to hire somebody unless there's a need, because there's a cost to it, to a certain extent to them. Even with the fact that you could be providing training incentive dollars to them. Emphasizing your organization's mission. Again, your mission may not be their mission at all. So unless you're doing a promo on the radio, probably stay away from identifying that. Excuse me for a second, I'm just going to take a drink of water. Making the initial contact. You must be able to communicate by phone. That's a definite. The ability to communicate by phone is paramount. And if you can have a casual conversation with a friend, you can have a casual conversation with an employer and keep it relaxed, keep it free-flowing and easy. You have limited time with an employer, and you have to make that time positive and successful as possible. Job development is marketing. The simple fact is you may be having a conversation, but while you're doing this, you're selling your services, you're selling yourself, and potentially you're selling your job seeker candidate. And you do have limited time to connect with an employer. Keep in mind as well that you have competition out there that are working not so much against you, because they may not know that you're their competition, but you have people that are presenting resumes, presenting applicants to them as well. So you've got to, if the relationship is developed and it's a positive relationship, I often suggest, and I've said this a number of times to some of our ECs, job developers, that what we want to be is we want to be the human resources department that's in the office next to the employer. We want to be that close to them if possible, so that when they pick up the phone to call, they don't call another agency, they call us. Be prepared to meet objections, and meet objections head on, but not in an argumentative way. Any progress you make with an employer can be eliminated if the employer finds that you're not providing information that's valuable or useful. So typically, and I'll say this typically, I don't argue with employers. I try to overcome their objections, but I will tell you a little bit of a story, a little bit of an aside. I've been doing this, as I said, for over 22 years. About 6 months ago, a young man came to me and he said, I'm looking for a job and I want to apprentice. And he was talking to me about jobs, apprentice type jobs or trades that paid the most. So I kind of had an idea. He's looking he's not looking for $11.40 an hour, he's looking for $20 an hour. So he was a rather assertive fellow, and he probably could have done his own self-directed job search, but he became a client, and I said I would make some calls for him, see what I could come up with. So he called me one day and he said, could you phone this plumbing supply place or plumbing place? And I said, sure. So I got on the phone and I talked to this individual, and she said, oh yeah, I met with him. And she said, oh, you know what, he's only interested in money. He just wants a big buck, and I started to argue with her about it. And I know you won't respond to this, but I'll ask, how long do you think that conversation lasts? It lasted about probably all of a minute, and I was off the phone. And it's one of the few times I've ever done that, and I lost an employer because of it. Because I knew in my heart that she was absolutely right, but I tried to defend it. Don't take rejection personally. Typically it's not you. It's maybe the employer doesn't need your services at this particular point. I'm a believer that most employers need our services at some point. But as I said earlier about the guy that sold freezer plans, you can sometimes make a lot of calls and not get hits and not get a response. For some reason in this area, we have good results with employers, and typically employers, they'll at least carry a conversation on with us on the phone, but they're also very good at meeting with us. They're obliging in that particular way. Now, depending on where you are, what part of the country you're from, that may not always be the case. And again, employers only have so much time. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about this, but one of the things, again, ensure you have the right person, offer a brief greeting and introduce yourself. I typically say, hi, I'm Dave. I'm a job developer from Lambton College Community Employment Services, and I screen and recruit for employers. I just wanted to let you know that I believe our organization can save you a lot of money. In fact, we don't charge for our services, and then I move on from there in regard to why I'm calling and discuss that a bit further. Get the employer talking about their needs. That's most important, most critical, because they have a lot of times with the employers who have situations where the wages aren't real high. They're $11 to $14 an hour. Some of them have retention issues that they've had to deal with over the years, and sometimes they don't look internally at that. They're looking at the individual who they hire as being responsible. State the benefits of doing business with you. Why would you do business with an employment agency? Well, for instance, it's free. We screen and recruit for employers. We have training incentives, training incentive dollars. We really attempt to get the right fit. We'll follow up with you in regard to that. But you don't have to go into a lot of that over the phone. You want to have that opportunity to meet with the employer, and even if they don't want to meet with you, ask for a referral. Maybe there's somebody else that they know that could use the services. And we're just starting to find that we are getting more and more referrals from employers, and that's a great thing for us as well. Again, initial call, listen carefully, meet the objections as they come up, and again, not in an argumentative way. Establish that your services are valuable. They're free, but they're still pretty valuable to those out in the with the businesses and organizations. And one thing I find is typically we deal with the small to medium-sized companies. They don't have HR. They don't have somebody that's specifically doing the hiring for them. And so for us to come in and say, we're going to screen and recruit for you, and oh, by the way, we also have dollars available for you, and oh, by the way, we can work with you to ensure that that person shows up for work. that's a valuable service for them. Again, ask for an in-person appointment. While you're on the phone and you're talking to them, if there's a job order, take that job order immediately and make sure you tell them, well, we're going to put this on, in Lambton College's case, we have a job bank where we post jobs for any employer. They don't have to be registered with us. They just have to phone in, or they can do it themselves. They can go online and do the registration and post a job. And we also post on Service Canada if they don't have an account. So we offer that service, again, free for them as well. And again, I know I'm repeating myself here a little bit. If the employer says no, one, you asked if they can have a referral, and also if you can follow up with them. I wouldn't never close the door on somebody, particularly if you think you can help them. Just ask for a referral. Keep in mind that you want to continue the conversation, whether it's a phone or in-person situation. Here's some questions that come up, and I've dealt with all of these. You know, we found that people don't show up for interviews. We found that people don't show up for interviews. Well, we ensure that. We work with the job seeker to ensure that they're there on time for an interview, any interview that you might provide. We use other agencies and have never found satisfactory employees. And that, you know what, that can be absolutely true. There's an objection. I'm not sure, unless you're in the know, that you would be aware of. Just say that we're a different agency. You know, that's one of the suggestions I make. We're a different agency, and this is what we'll do for you in regard to that. We found issues with absenteeism when we hire from agencies like yours. Not unusual to hear that. We've heard that as well, that there are situations where people do not show up on time, and they're late, or they leave through the day, or they don't show up at all. One of the things I say in that regard, I work with you to monitor the placement, ensure that the client attends his or her shift as scheduled. I want to know. I want to keep the lines of communication open. So it's one of those things that if you think you make the sale, you get the placement, and that's the end of it. And I know most of you don't believe that, but it isn't. That service after the fact is very, very valuable. It's critical to your ongoing relationship. If you can imagine, and I meant to say this earlier in regard to who's the most important in the relationship, but let's say you have a choice between your wife or your husband and your cousin. You see your cousin maybe once every 6 months, but you see your wife every day or your husband every day. Who's the most important in that relationship? And how much do you work at keeping it going? Because we're all human beings. We all have certain expectations about communication and trust and other things, and loyalty and things like that. So try to present that. That's what you want to achieve in the relationship with an employer. In case of we're not hiring, you just say, can I follow up with you at a later date? I'd like to have the opportunity to screen and recruit potential candidates for you. Okay. Handling objections. Always listen carefully, and when you're asking questions and finding about the need, you're going to be listening for that. But listen carefully at all times. As information comes out about their attitudes and their feelings and emotions about certain things that, in some cases, maybe you're not going to overcome. You're going to acknowledge it, but never argue with it. Don't interrupt and don't challenge. Acknowledge the objection and the employer's point of view. You may have a different point of view. That's the last thing you want to do, is get into an argument. I met with an employer today who thought Donald Trump was the man, and I mean that in the sense that he was the correct man as President of the United States. And on a couple of points I agreed with him, but I think we could have gone off on a real distant tangent in regard to our discussion about his suitability as President. And ask open-ended questions to clarify what their thoughts are, what their objections are in regard to that. Again, handling objections. Ask the employer to look at it from a different perspective. There's another viewpoint maybe that they might accept. Again, you're not arguing, you're just presenting another idea. And offer an advantage that may outweigh the objection, something that will overcome that objection. Could be money. For instance, you could have somebody that you want to place, and the employer knows that person within the community, and you say, well, I know there have been issues in the past with that particular person, but I'm willing to give you a 2-week free trial. We'll cover the wages on this individual for 2 weeks, and I want to prove to you that this person is a good fit. And check to see if you have successfully countered the objection. Getting specifics, offering services. One of the things you want to know, again, is part of determining needs. And I've got a number of questions here. How does the employer normally recruit? Some employers recruit by newspaper still. Some of them put an ad on Kijiji, or they go to Service Canada, they go to Indeed, post it. There are some of the smaller ones have their, or some of the organizations we work with that they're small locations, but they're part of a much larger company. They may advertise through their own website and things like that. So one of the things is we're bypassing that. Hopefully, in some respects, we're able to look at, again, the face-to-face method of recruiting, and that's presenting a candidate that you feel is the most fit, rather than just the employer has a pile of resumes. And I've heard this before. I can send you, my discussion with them might go like this: I can send you every resume we get, and typically the response is, don't do that. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to select the most appropriate based on what we need. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, but there is, when we get to job descriptions, there's a job description, if I could put it that way, and then there's a job description, the one that you see. And I'll give you an example of that. I have a very good company that I work with, and I've posted a job for maybe a graphic designer as one example. This is a legitimate job I posted for them and recruited for them as well. So if the job posting goes up, one of the things it's not going to say, will not hire anyone over 35. You and I both know that's ageism and it's discrimination, but this is an organization that prides itself on having a younger workforce, and they have found it to be most successful when they have individuals of similar ages within the organization. So that's who we would. That's the type of client we would market to them, a client that fits that particular need. That's just one example. And there are many other examples, and you'll find them that the job description says one thing, but really what you know is something else. What type of problems do you encounter when you're recruiting? They have problems getting quality candidates sometimes, and sometimes this is based on their unwillingness to increase the wages. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes that's legitimate. Sometimes they choose not to increase the wages. Typically, I find that you increase the wages, you get a better quality candidate. And one of the things I say in that regard is work with me and I'll screen to ensure that only the viable candidates get to you. What do you look for when hiring for entry-level positions? And again, I've just told you the story about the company that prefers to hire under 35. Well, determine what a good candidate is versus an ideal. So there's two things there. You've got an ideal candidate, and typically when you see a newspaper ad, it says the ideal candidate will. Well, to be honest with you, in most cases, really what you need to be getting at when you're working with the employer is what does it require to be a good candidate for the position? Because generally, that's who you're going to be placing, is a good candidate. That's what you want to look at, not the ideal candidate. Because you may never see that ideal candidate, but you may have a guy or a lady who fits the bill. For all intents and purposes, they're going to be successful in that particular position? Do you have a high level of turnover in any particular area? And there are organizations, won't mention any of them, that do have a high level of turnover. So what type of candidate would fit into that? Maybe a candidate with some barriers. And I'll use the example of Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is obviously right across Canada and in parts of the U.S., but there's an employer who I believe is coming to speak in Sarnia in the next couple of weeks who owns, I think, 14 stores in Toronto or something along that line, owns 14 Tim Hortons. So he hires individuals who are staying longer and actually, in fact, quite a bit longer, and he's hiring individuals sometimes with disabilities, understanding that he is getting a good candidate for a position and he's not going to have as much turnover as he normally would in that type of situation. What's the most common reason for terminating employees? Why are you letting so many people go? Is there something we can do to resolve that issue by, for instance, the type of candidate? Maybe you need to change the process. And part of my role as an employment consultant job developer is also to advise employers on HR issues. We call them HR intensive services. So advising employers on particular situations, and we're fortunate we have an individual that's got 13 years of HR experience that works as an EC job developer now, so there's obviously some expertise within our organization. So you try to solve a problem for an employer, and if you can solve a problem as it relates to terminating, and I've heard all sorts of reasons. The largest company we work with, as I said, was an employer with over 800 employees. One of their issues is absenteeism. Another issue for them is sometimes it involves drugs, consumption of alcohol, and things like that. So as much as you're able to, work with that employer and try to resolve that. This slide I was going to take out, so I'm going to bypass it based on the amount of time I have, which I'm not sure. Janet can tell me, advise me how I'm doing.
You've got 10 more minutes, but we'd like to spend a little bit of time if we do have any questions from the audience, because I'm sure they are going to be.
Okay. I will do my best, Janet. Getting the specifics, job descriptions, ask the questions. What type of person doesn't work out well? What sort of background are you looking for? Can you tell me what's involved in hiring and the interview process? Again, you're asking questions during your meeting, your face-to-face meeting with the employer. How can I better ensure that things go smoothly for this employer? What is it that I can do for that employer that will help them out and resolve some of the problems? Because you are a problem solver as a job developer. Again, you're a business marketing salesperson, so you're there to solve some problems. This goes beyond the typical, the initial meeting with the employer. This is when you're building that relationship. You're in a situation where you want to keep that relationship going, just like you want a marriage or a partnership to keep going. You have to put something into it. And one of the things that you want to be looking at is solicit employer input into training. This is maybe where you're getting information back from the employer, because they may be aware of training opportunities. They also may have training issues that you want to discuss. This is a great time to talk about the Canada Ontario job grant to an employer. Some are not aware of it, and some of them, quite honestly, we're dealing with a lot of companies in this area who need to be providing succession planning. They need to be training new managers, new supervisors, because in a few years they are going to be in short supply. Involve employers in your organization, and that can involve encouraging them to give presentations, conduct mock interviews, coaching participants, potentially give testimonials, things like that. One of the components, I'll just mention this, of the YJC program is in fact a coach mentorship program, and that's one of the things that it takes quite a bit of time to develop, but it's an interesting concept if you can get employers on side to working in that type of situation. Provide useful information to employers. It may be something you've read that's going to be good for their business. It may be some information that they are completely unaware about. It may be an event that's coming up that they might want to participate. One of the things that we've done in the past to show appreciation through a larger event is we've done a employer awards event. We haven't done it for about 2 years, but prior to that we had 4 years running. We had 6 awards. We'd have a beautiful buffet meal for them and a sit-down meal. We'd have a speaker come in, and then we'd present awards to some of the best employers that we were dealing with. And again, this is all after the fact, after you've started to build that relationship. Again, remind employers about your organization. Out of sight, out of mind in this particular case, and make sure that they're aware of what you're doing. You send a promotional item to them that you may have, if that's something your organization does. Send them an email to update them on what's happening. Make yourself aware of what's going on in their business, and that's the other thing. If keep current on what's happening. Maybe they're in a layoff situation. Periodically, that does happen with employers. Some would say, well, this is not an opportunity for a job developer, but actually it is. It's an opportunity to bring more clients through your front door. And I don't know what your situation is necessarily. Excuse me, I'm just going to take another drink of water. I don't know what your situation is necessarily in regards to the number of clients through the door, but we have this past year, we've seen somewhat of a decline in that. And so you want more clients to walk through your door, because that just means more individuals who are available to other employers who are looking to fill placements. So layoff is an opportunity. It's not so good for the person getting laid off, but it's an opportunity to help that person and also help an employer or an account. Offer the use of your facilities. Potentially, if you want to have a training session, or they want to have a training session, and they've got nowhere to go, they might want to train 8 or 10 people. We offer free WHMIS and occupational health and safety awareness training here to employers for their staff, and that's new hires and current staff. Make connections with an employer that show you're interested in their success. And get to know the employer personally, and I mean that on a professional basis. You don't want a situation, and a later slide may discuss this a bit further, but you don't want a situation where it's a personal relationship. You know them personally, but it's a professional relationship, because once you have to make decisions regarding that particular employer, or maybe it's a client situation and you've got a personal relationship, it's very difficult to make those decisions. No job openings, so I would suggest call or visit anyways. Build that relationship up by following up on a hire. Find out what's going on with that particular hire. Even if it's not a paid placement with training incentive, provide information about new services or programs, inquiring about future needs. You want to know, and we try to do this on a regular basis, is we do labor market research, and we have one person that's doing it right now, inquiring about the future needs, whether it's training or whether it's employment needs. We want to know. Previewing a new group of job seekers. Tell the employer if the particular job seekers you've got are in their area of potential need. Let them know about those particular job seekers. Congratulating an employer on a successful year, or personal success sometimes, and letting them know that you know as well. Providing info on new policy, regulation, or rule from government. Now, there's changes all the time into policies and procedures that governments provide, but employers don't know about. And it could be violence in the workplace training. It could be changes to WHMIS or occupational health and safety awareness. There's a lot of folks still out there, employers, who do not have occupational health and safety awareness for new employees. So that's another area where you can provide opportunities to serve. Sometimes we'll make mistakes. One of the things I really encourage you to do is avoid the sense that you're begging for a job. In all honesty, unless they're champions and you build a solid relationship with them, begging for jobs doesn't work. it actually demeans your service and the clients that you work with. Not maintaining current employee relationships, I talked about that. Make sure you're in contact, better quality than quantity, focusing on relationships with few returns. There are employers that honestly you're not going to be able to work with. There just isn't an opportunity there for one reason or another. It could be safety within a facility. It could be we have had a couple of employers who don't have WSIB coverage. That can happen. You can't work with those folks, and you can't place them fearing for an employee's safety. Now the employee can go directly to them if they want. So focus on where you're going to get returns, not remaining professional. I spoke to that just a minute or so ago. Calling employers who don't want your services. If you make a call and they definitely don't want your services, don't follow up with them. Not following up with employers when placements don't work out. Key area there, employers want to know that you empathize with them. They understand that things don't work out sometimes, and quite honestly, we have placements that go south or north or whatever direction they sometimes go. And but very important there to follow up with them, not only to empathize and to offer, you know, your maybe not sense of sympathy, but your sense that you're going to support them through this, and you understand that that does happen, and you've got a replacement. That's the other good thing. Complaining to employers. Leave your complaints at home. Stand in front of a mirror if you must, but don't get into discussions, particularly political discussions or complaints about other employers in particular. It could be a confidentiality issue. And in the broadest sense, complaining doesn't fit into a marketing sales business plan. So we have reached the end. At this point, I'm just going to summarize, and then maybe if there are questions out there, as long as everybody's still here with me, I'll take some questions.
You lost a few. They probably had 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock appointments, but only a couple.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to finish up with summary. As I indicated, job development is marketing and sales. It's not social work. If you think it's social work and you want to continue that way, good luck, but you might be in the wrong field. Use the language of business when working with employers. That's pretty key. It's just common sense. Learn what your organization can provide to employers. You're more confident, you're more sure of where you're going to find a fit for those services with an employer. Research employers, know as much about them as you can, who you're working with and who you can benefit the most. And lastly, build a lasting relationship with an employer, a professional relationship with an employer, and you know, as long as that employer is in business, they're going to call on you. It's like any other relationship that's a positive relationship. Hopefully, they're the first. You're the first to get a call from them if they need any assistance. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, Dave. That was great. We'll just spend 1 or 2 minutes if there are any questions out there. I don't see any coming in right now, but you know, I think there's lots of things that we take away from this. You know, for me, it's things like, you know, what does that package look like when you go in to see an employer for the first time? You know, is there stuff on, I would imagine, COJG, your services, because I don't know about you. You know, it's that would be interesting for us all to share what it is that we actually take in for that initial visit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I typically get a gauge on what the employer wants beforehand, and I'll from my own perspective, I talk about the most urgent needs, and then I may not even introduce something like COJG, the Canada Ontario Job Grant, until the following meeting.
Okay.
When I can have a little bit more time, but typically I talk about our recruiting and screening processes. I talk about the training incentive dollars available and the type of clients that we have as well.
Because time is of the essence, right? You really only have them for a few minutes. So, you know, sometimes because they're, you know, I've been to, when I was a job developer, I've walked around a plant floor because and spoke to them because they're so busy. You know, you're talking to them as they go. Because it's tough.
No,
yeah,
it is absolutely, and I've done that as well. Where you have to go where they are. You have to meet them where they are, and I find that I always meet employers, or at least 99% of the time I meet employers at their place of business for a number of reasons, but also because it's more convenient, they're more comfortable there,
Yep,
and it works a lot better.
of
Knowing
course.
they know that I've taken the time to step out of my comfort zone and spend some time with them.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. As far as questions, I'm just getting a lot of thank yous. Somebody did ask if the copy of the presentation is going to be made available, and as I mentioned in the beginning, there will be a PowerPoint presentation. It will be at some point put on our website, and we're possibly looking at a recording as well, so we will let you know about that.
can you throw this out to our audience, whether
Yes.
it was relevant to them? Because if I need to make changes, obviously at this point I have two more to do,
Yes.
but if we need to make changes, we want to react to those needs for changes. So.
Yeah, no, I'm getting a lot of very good presentation, great job, thank you, that was very informative. And some person said that they like the advice about using employer lingo, so candidate versus client. I think we forget about that. Um,
Yeah.
Another person is saying, is there any way we might be able to have a copy emailed to us? I don't, yeah, I mean, at some point, I guess, but it is going to be on the college CSIS, so employmentcsis.ca website. It will be on
Sure.
there. So,
Okay.
so again, a lot of thank yous, Dave. It looks as though it's been very well received, and folks are welcome to add anything if they wish to send me copy anything that they would like added, so Dave can do that for the next go around. Okay.
All right. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Yes, that was great. Thank you very much. And
Take care.
we're gonna log out now and thank everybody for taking the time. It was very much appreciated. Thank you now. Bye. So Dave, you'll just send me a copy of that?
I will. Yeah, no
Okay.
problem.
Okay then. All right then. So
All right.
we'll check out and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Janet.
All right then. Take care. Bye.
Take care. You too. Bye now.